you. Nearing a close to Canto 1, Chapter 9, verse 46. Bhismadeva has already left, headed for what Prabhupada explained. He didn't go to Krishna Loka, he went to Vaikuntha. His worshipable deity was Narayana. He attained Vaikuntha, although he knew all about Krishna, meaning all about Krishna in Vrindavan and so forth and so on. He was vastly learned, yet his heart's attraction was Parthasarathi and the form of Lord Narayana in Vaikuntha, knowing that Narayana and Krishna are the same. I spent some time today doing a little review on some chronology question. Maybe you remember a few days back, we had some chronology discussion about were there two Rajasuya Yagyas? You know what a Rajasuya Yagya is? Rajasuya Yagya is a yagya for honoring a new king. Raja means king. Rajasuya Yagya. So for sure, there was a major Rajasuya Yagya that established Yudhisthira as the king when he was still residing in Indraprastha. We narrated this a few times. But we'll do a quick one more time. Krishna's in Dwarka. And a visit is paid by a Brahmana carrying a message from 20,000 kings saying, help, we'll take shelter of you. We're in Jarasanda's prison. He's planning to make a human sacrifice of us to Lord Shiva. Help, deliver us. At the same time that he's in that royal assembly hall, in comes Narada. Everything stops. Narada is honored in appropriate manner. Brahmana and great Rishi. And he explains his reason for visiting. He's carrying a message from Yudhisthira. He wants Krishna, requesting Yudhisthira to come to Indraprastha and be the guest of honor at the Rajasuya Yagya, so that he can be officially anointed as the emperor, not just because there are many, many kings, but the emperor amongst kings. So what does Krishna do? He asks Uddhava, what should I do? Not that Krishna doesn't know, but he has a plan, and part of his plan is to give service to Yudhisthira, to Uddhava, and part of that plan is also Krishna's plan, and that is to give the honor of killing Jarasandha to Bhima. Because Krishna could have done it. Krishna could have done it the 18 times that Jarasandha came with his whole big army. Krishna could have easily done it. But one of the reasons he didn't was he wanted to give the honor to Bhima. So Uddhava came up with a plan. It was a good plan. Everyone liked the plan. Of these two things, the first thing you should do is make arrangements for the finish Jarasandha, because you shouldn't do the Rajasuya Yagya while there's still kings in opposition. So all kings have to either submit or be subdued. And Jarasandha, there's no way he's going to submit. And there's only one person who has the power, we didn't say besides you, but it's Bhima, but they're of equal strength. But if Bhima fights one-on-one and you're there, he'll win. That'll tilt the pan scale. Because of your presence, he will be victorious. So, fantastic plan. Everyone says, Haribol. And almost the entire city of Dwarka emptied out. 16,108 queens, each one on a palanquin, each one with her 10 sons, each one with their maidservants and their whole paraphernalia and, yada, yada, yada. It's a big deal. Big procession. They visited different places, big reception. They made it to Indraprastha, big reception. Krishna stayed for 4 months, rainy season time. And at the end of the 4 months, again, Yudhisthira said, Krishna, we've sent my 4 brothers went in the 4 directions to accept taxes from all the other kings or beat them in battle, because that was the deal. They had to pay some tribute or challenge. And everyone in Mahabharata, I checked. It's even said that Shishupal, Shalva, and Duryodhana paid tribute. Far out. I mean, they were inimical to Krishna, but they had respect for Yudhisthira. So it doesn't say what they gave, but there wasn't a battle with them, except for Jarasandha. Commentary says Krishna gave a special request to Bhima: don't challenge Jarasandha. Not yet. So it came back. What to do? Jarasandha hadn't submitted. Krishna said, here's Uddhava's plan. The 3 of us will go in the guise of brahmanas to Jarasandha's place and request charity, because he's known to be, he'll always give charity to brahmanas. And the charity will be, give us a fight to the finish. So Jarasandha figured out these aren't Brahmins. Look at their arms, look at their shoulders. They're massive. But anyway, they're in the guise of Brahmanas, so I'll whatever they want. So he gave the consent. And then Krishna spoke and said, this is this one, this is that one, this is me. We want to fight. He said, very well. But I won't fight you, you're a coward. And Arjuna, he's younger and he isn't as strong as me, so I won't fight him either. But Bhima, here's your club, Bhima. And they fought for 27 days. On the 28th day, Bhima said, oh, Madhava, I can't defeat him. Krishna didn't say anything. He just took a gesture. He took a twig that had a fork in the twig and bifurcated the fork in the twig, which meant break him in half. Because you know the meaning of Jarasandha's name? No? Jara is the name of a Rakshasi who found 2 children in halves. One child in 2 halves. She put the 2 halves, out of curiosity. She was going to eat them, but she just, out of curiosity, she put the 2 halves together. They became whole. She had heard that this happened to the king of Magadha. It's a long story, but his queens gave birth to half a child, so he had them thrown. Jara this Rakshasi lady found them, put them together, and it became one person. She had heard that this had happened to the king, so she took them to the king and says, here's your son. I just have one request. Name him after me. So that's how he got the name. Jara Sanda. Jara Sanda. So Krishna said that's how you can finish him. Break him in two. So Bhima threw him to the ground, put his foot on the one leg and lifted his other leg and ripped him in half. Finished. Finished. Krishna embraced Bhima again and again. Well done, well done. It was all his arrangement. Well done, well done. And they went and liberated the kings. In that chapter that they liberated the kings, the number got bumped up from 20,000 to 20,800. I mean, you know how many queens there were? Princesses, 16,000. How many? 16,100. This is 20,800. The wonderful prayers and so forth and so on. Krishna had them honored by Jarasanda's son, whose name was Sukadev. He made Sukadev the king, and he honored them. And then off they went back to their kingdoms. So while we were going over, that was one, then the Rajasuya Yagya took place. Krishna went back to Indraprastha, finished, Jarasanda's finished, let's do the Rajasuya Yagya. So they had the Rajasuya Yagya. Shishupal was killed during the Rajasuya Yagya. Many other things happened. So there was a Rajasuya Yagya. Yudhisthira became king of Indraprastha. And there was another nearby kingdom, was the kingdom of Duryodhana in Hastinapur. So we read in chapter 9 of Canto 1, verse 41, that there was a Rajasuya Yagya that was performed after the Kurukshetra battle. So I was very curious. None of the scholars that I consulted that really know the scriptures, there's no mention of such a yagya. Second one. But Prabhupada said they didn't say there was a second one. He said there was a Rajasuya yagya after the Kurukshetra battle. So I wrote after all this research, the conclusion was that three things. In the Puranas are not, they don't stick to chronology. Things are not narrated in a chronological order. In the Itihasas, that's Mahabharata and Ramayana, they're narrated in chronological order, but the Puranas, they're not. And our acharyas also do not give much heed to chronology. Sometimes even they combine one event with some other event at another time, and as if it's one event. And so, respecting the Prabhupada said there was a yagya, a Rajasuya yagya, after the Kurukshetra battle, it's possible that there was a second one. Because after the battle, the kingdom that the Kauravas were ruling, Hastinapur, etc., there had to be a king. And it wasn't his son, it was Yudhisthira. So some kind of a ceremony, whatever it was. So that was like an interesting exercise. And along with that exercise came a very similar kind of exercise where Jiva Goswami was explaining the kind of scrambled chronology of when different pastimes of Krishna took place. So I'm not going to go through all of that. There's a document that you now have, so you can circulate that if you haven't done so already. But there's another one, and I haven't even gotten to text 46 yet. There's a chronology that's scrambled, but here's the unscrambling of the chronology. And it has to do with something that I misspoke. I mean, it was unintentional, but this is a correction of something I misspoke. When Krishna spoke twice to Uddhava, one was in Dwaraka, and the other was just before his departure, near Prabhas, by the side of the river Saraswati. So which of those two was Maitreya present for? Because Maitreya heard directly from Krishna. A or B? Did he hear the entire Uddhava Gita? Or B, did he hear the discussion between Krishna and Uddhava that took place just before his departure? It's B. So just to give you a little idea of how to carefully read the Bhagavatam, even when it's not chronological, here's the sequence. After, by Krishna's arrangements, in the beginning part of Canto 11, we find Narada paying visit to Dwaraka. He is invited by Vasudeva, Krishna's father, to come to his home. So he goes, and Vasudeva honors him. There's some discussions on transcendental topics, because Vasudeva specifically says, I was very interested in Krishna as my son, but I didn't take the opportunity to inquire from you about transcendental topics. So he asked transcendental topics, and there's a long section that includes Narada describing to Vasudeva about the Prachetas visiting a yajna of King Nimi. Right? Anyone familiar with that? 11th canto starts chapter 2, 3, 4, like that. Navayogendras, they're spoken about in the 5th canto, 4th canto, and then the 5th canto. We don't hear about them again until the 11th canto. So there's 9 of them, Navayogendras. And Maharishi Nimi asks questions, and they take turns giving answers. That section closes, and now it's time for Vasudeva is very enthused by Narada's visit. He wants to have a big yajna, so he invites many Brahmins. They come, they do a yajna, and when the yajna is finished, the Brahmanas go to some nearby place and do what Brahmanas do. They get together and do Brahmana things together with each other. Well, the young boys played a joke on the Brahmanas, and it was a very bad joke. It had very bad consequences. Samba was the son of Jambavati. Samba dressed like a lady, wearing a sari, and put a lump of iron under the sari. And the other boys said, see this lady, she's really shy, but she would like to know whether the child that she's carrying will be a boy or girl. And the Brahmanas knew that they were being made fun of. They said, that child is not a child, it's a lump of iron, and that lump of iron will be the destruction of the entire Yadu dynasty. Go tell King Ugrasen. So they told King Ugrasena. And Ugrasena said, asked the Brahmins what to do. The Brahmin said, grind that lump of iron into powder and throw it in the sea. So that's what they did. They ground the lump of iron into powder and threw it in the sea. Except for one piece wouldn't grind. So they threw that into the sea. A fish swallowed that piece of iron. A fisherman caught the fish. The fish was brought to the marketplace. A hunter bought the fish, opened up the fish, found the lump of iron, and fashioned it into an arrowhead. It was the arrow that hit the heel of Krishna. That's how Krishna left. This hit the heel with the lump of iron arrowhead. And the rest washed up to the shore of Prabhas. It mixed with the reeds that were growing by the shore of the ocean. And those reeds were iron-like, and they served to be the destruction of the Yadu dynasty when they went. Krishna instructed them, go to Prabhas. This offense was made by the Brahmanas to relieve ourselves, our dynasty, of the offense of offending a Brahmana. Go to Prabhas and perform a yajna. So that's what they did. And then they had a little party, and they got a little tipsy. And someone said to this, and someone said to that one, and they got into an argument, and they started smashing and bashing and destroyed each other. So, after the Yadu dynasty was annihilated, then Krishna was near Prabhas, and he went to the place where he ended up departing this world. Now, going back to after this curse took place, the curse of the Brahmanas, the Yadu dynasty would be destroyed. The demigods visited Krishna in Dwarka. They said, you've accomplished everything that we've requested of you. The demons are destroyed. So if you so desire, you can depart and return to the spiritual realm, if you so desire. So Krishna was sitting there considering time to depart. Time to depart. Time to depart. Vidura put two and two together. Krishna is going to depart. So Vidura approached Krishna and pleaded with Krishna, take me with you. I won't be able to bear the separation. And he then asked a number of questions, and the Uddhava Gita took place in Dwarka before the incident at Prabhas. At the end, the discussion with the discussion with Uddhava starts Canto 11, Chapter 6. It goes all the way to Chapter 29. Big section. At the end of Chapter 29, Canto 11, Krishna says, I want you to go, I'm going to depart now. I want you to go to Badrik Ashram and take shelter of the devotees of Narayan Rishi. You can share with them everything that I have spoken. I came into this world to give my association to my devotees. I never made it there. You can go as my representative. Here's some service for you. With the heaviest of hearts, Uddhava started, but he didn't make it because he was feeling separation from Krishna, so he came back. And Uddhava came back for now the second conversation. Uddhava found Krishna by the side of the river Saraswati before he departed, after Prabhas. And this is found in Canto 3, Chapter 4. Canto 3, Chapter 4. Uddhava's telling his story. Canto 3, Chapter 4. He's telling his story to Vidura. What happened? He found Krishna resting, leaning against a young banyan tree, and he fell at Krishna's feet. I couldn't make it to Badrik Ashram. I couldn't bear separation from you. You're going to leave. I know. I sense it. You're going to leave. So he again asked further questions. While that second discussion, this is chronology, from the 11th canto, we find about there was a second conversation that took place is narrated in the third canto, their second get-together. And when Uddhava was hearing for the second time from Krishna, there's not a long record of what their conversation was. But Maitreya was also there. He just happened, providential arrangement, to be present. So Maitreya heard from Krishna directly, just like Uddhava heard from Krishna directly, or Arjuna heard from Krishna directly. Maitreya heard from Krishna directly. Maitreya wasn't on the same spiritual platform as Uddhava. Very clear. Uddhava's topmost devotee. Maitreya is a mixed. He's a devotee, but he's also a jnani and also a yogi. So he's not a pure devotee. But hearing from Krishna, he became greatly benefited. His bhakti took a big leap. And at the end of that conversation, Krishna instructed Uddhava, now do as I said, go to Badrik Ashram. And Maitreya also departed. And finally, Krishna said to Daruka, you go back to, this is chariot driver, go back to Dwarka, let them know that the whole city of Dwarka is going to go underwater in 7 days. They should vacate. And everyone should be taken, that's remaining there, my queens, etc., should be taken to Indraprastha for protection. Arjuna was assigned to that service, to escort them to Indraprastha. Now that's in Canto 3, Chapter 4. Switching back to Canto 11, Chapter 30. Balaram departs, Krishna departs. The details are described. So Maitreya was not there for Uddhava Gita, but he was there for the second conversation. Now, it's another detail because it's parallel. That's Uddhava, Vidura. Vidura was insulted prior to the Kurukshetra battle. He left, he went on pilgrimage 34 years later. After the Prabhas event, he visited Prabhas as part of the places. This is narrated in Canto 3, Chapter 1. He visited Prabhas. He came to know the Yadu clan is gone. He continued on his travels, and we find in Canto 3, Chapter 1, verse 24, after Prabhas, he finds Uddhava on the side of the river Jamuna in Vrindavan. Ah, Uddhava, how nice to see you. How wonderful. How's everybody in Dwarka? Although he knew he didn't want to say. And then Vidura expressed what Vidura expressed. And at the end of chapter 4, Canto 3, chapter 4, he departs. He was given some service, Uddhava. They were all day speaking, and into the night, so in the morning time, he left for Badrikashram. And Vidura then went in the north direction and found Maitreya, and that's where the second half of Canto 3 through Canto 4 and part of Canto 5, it's Maitreya speaking to Vidura. Maitreya speaking to Vidura. So all of this it's an example of events that are chronological, are not narrated chronologically in the Bhagavatam. And it takes, a lot of care to find the thread and the needle and where's the hole and patch it up. It's quite logical, it's just not chronological. And before I did this research, knowing that there was Uddhava Gita, and knowing that Maitreya heard from Krishna with Uddhava present, I had the mistaken, understanding that Maitreya was there for hearing Uddhava Gita. He wasn't. And there isn't a whole long description of what was the talks at that second meeting with Uddhava and Krishna. But except that Maitreya was there, and that he benefited greatly. Okay, so now we're ready for Canto 1, Chapter 9. Any questions on all of that? I hope it was clear. A little detailed, but... Okay, let's go to Canto 1, Chapter 9. Verse 46, yes? O descendant of Bhrigu, Shonaka Rishi is in the descendancy or the lineage of Bhrigu Muni. Who's Bhrigu Muni? Bhrigu Muni is the priest of the demigods. And in his lineage was Shonaka Rishi. After performing funeral rituals for the dead body of Bhismadeva, Maharaj Yudhisthira was momentarily overtaken with grief. Purport. Bhismadeva was not only a great family head of Maharaj Yudhisthira, but he was also a great philosopher and friend to him, his brothers, and his mother. Since Maharaj Pandu, the father of the 5 brothers, headed by Maharaj Yudhisthira, had died, Bhismadeva was the most affectionate grandfather of the Pandavas and caretaker of the widow, daughter-in-law Kunti Devi. Although Maharaj Dhritarashtra, the elder uncle of Maharaj Yudhisthira, was there to look after them, his affection was more on the side of his 100 sons, headed by Duryodhana. Ultimately, a colossal clique was fabricated to deprive the 5 fatherless brothers of the rightful claim of the kingdom of Hastinapur. There was great intrigue, common in imperial palaces, and the 5 brothers were exiled to the wilderness. But Bhismadeva was always a sincere, sympathetic, well-wisher, grandfather, friend, and philosopher to Maharaj Yudhisthira, even up to the last moment of his life. He died very happily by seeing Maharaj Yudhisthira to the throne. Otherwise, he would have long ago quitted his material body instead of suffering agony over the undue sufferings of the Pandavas He was simply waiting for the opportune moment because he was sure and certain that the sons of Pandu would come out victorious in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, as his lordship Sri Krishna was their protector. As a devotee of the Lord, he knew that the Lord's devotee cannot be vanquished at any time. Maharaj Yudhisthira was quite aware of all these good wishes of Bhismadeva, and therefore he must have been feeling the great separation. He was sorry for the separation of a great soul, and not for the material body which Bhismadeva relinquished. The funeral ceremony was a necessary duty, although Bhismadeva was a liberated soul. Since Bhismadeva was without issue, the eldest grandson, namely Maharaj Yudhisthira, was the rightful person to perform this ceremony. It was a great boon to Bhismadeva that an equally great son of the family undertook the last rites of a great man. So it's the whole thing is a big deal. I mean, funerals are big deals, but Grandfather Bhisma's passing was akin to Maharaj Parikshit's passing. I mean, sages from not only all the countryside, but from the devas and many great personalities came to participate in this event. And the nature of events like this are not so common. I mean, when a great personality passes in this world, it's still there's festivities and arrangements and so forth. But this was something out of this world because of the stature and status of Grandfather Bhisma. No, it's just a cultural point is that the eldest son is to perform the funeral, just like in Ramayana. Ram was in the forest when Dasarath died. It was his duty, and he felt very sorry when he heard later that his father had died. And so he did what he did when he heard that his father died. The ritual was observed, but it was up to Bharata to perform that because he was the eldest one remaining of the two remaining. So it's part of culture. That Vedic culture has strength, and people who follow Vedic culture, they know what to do because of culture. And people that don't have culture, they don't know what to do. And they do something, and their intentions may be good intentions, but it just doesn't have the same impact, spiritually or materially. So good intention is good. Good intention is always good. But it's a lesson of life that good intention isn't good enough. Good intention isn't good enough. Good intention is good. Good intention isn't good enough. I hear a recording. I'll tell a little story. I don't know how you say their name. Cicadas, those little insects that come around every 13 years or something like that. That's how you say the name? Cicadas? Something like that. So when I was about 4 years old, that was one summer was the year that they came around. And it's pretty intense. There's swarms and swarms and swarms. They landed in the trees, and you could hear them eating the leaves of the trees till they're all gone. So my mother made a mistake. She gave me one of those old spray things of black flag to spray into the garage so the cicadas wouldn't infest the garage. And I saw in the garage was our kitty cat. So I thought I would do a nice service and spray the kitty cat so that she wouldn't get any problem from the cicadas. And then the next morning, kitty cat was in the garage floor, dead. My intention was good, but it didn't have a good result. So I learned that lesson the hard way. It was a nice lesson, but it's an important lesson. Good intention isn't good enough. Or there's another saying that Prabhupada would express: even the path to hell is paved by good intention. Have you heard that one before? Even the path to hell is paved by good intention. People that are diabolical, their intentions may be, they think it's the right thing to do. I mean, not necessarily in the category of virtue, but it's the right thing to do because, and then they fill in the blank, because it's the right thing to do. Good intention. So those who are so therefore, the mode of ignorance being prevalent in material creation, it's important to have knowledge of the Vedas, so at least we have guidelines of what to do. And at least in terms of dharma, dharmically, what's to be done and what's not to be done. Vidhis and nishedhas, things to be done, things not to be done. And Bhismadeva was one such authority. And when they had questions, they'd go to Grandfather Bhisma. Here's a situation, what should be done? I can't remember exactly. In the course of Mahabharata is filled with such things. There was a situation where I forget the situation. There was a difficult situation. Damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of situation. So there was a question what to do. And the person who was asking what to do, he consulted Sanat Kumar, what to do. And he asked the Brahmins. And then Sanat Kumar recited a historical event that went back like eons and said there was a similar situation, went like this, and this was what was done. So based upon what was done eons ago and the authority of Sanat Kumar, this is what you should do. So that's what they did. But supposing you don't have Sanat Kumar around, what do you do? Probably going to make mistakes. So what do you do when it's like this age of Kali? It's a situation where people are not sufficiently knowledgeable in the Vedas. What do you do? I'm preparing the answer is you perform the Yoga Dharma. When in doubt, chant. Because that's always right. A little sharing, and then I'll end. Something that I have been doing for the past 12 years is visiting, now I can't visit, but conducting classes for the devotees in China. And the situation in China, aside from the government is what the government is, both the government and the devotees want to have the Krishna consciousness accepted in a long-lasting way. Because one devotee, Yasoda Kumar, very learned devotee, researched for about 3 years, 2.5 years, and gave a seminar on the history of religion in China, from the Tang Dynasty on, when Buddhism came in, and forward in time. With a short, after an hour and a half presentation of 2.5 years of study, religion that lasted accepted Chinese characteristics, and religion that didn't withered. There was a time in history when Buddhism was introduced, and around in China, Buddhist texts and Buddhist teachings and practices and so forth. It was new because it started in India, and then it got exported to China. I mean, there's other places it got exported to, Southeast Asia and so on, but China specifically. And around the same time, Brahmins were visiting from India. And there's architectural and museum sculptures and things. They had some traction, but they're rigid. They didn't adopt to the Chinese culture, or adapt to the Chinese culture. So it withered, it went away. And Buddhism adapted aspects of the Chinese culture. For example, one of the features of Chinese culture that's not at all part of Buddhism is honoring forefathers. So in Buddhist temples, they adopted a practice of honoring the forefathers. Today, it's an annual, a special big deal festival. It's called, I don't know what the words are in Chinese, but in English it's tomb sweeping. It's part of Chinese culture. You go to the place where your ancestors are buried and you do some things. I don't know what those things are, but you honor your ancestors. That's part of Chinese culture, and that became part of Buddhism, took it on board. And some other things. So, this long story short, for Krishna consciousness to stick, it's not just distribute lots of books and chant Hare Krishna a bunch. There has to be some Chinese characteristics. Otherwise, it won't endure. It'll rise, and then it'll dwindle, and it'll fade over time. So how to have, they have an acronym, KCCC. Stands for Krishna Consciousness with Chinese Characteristics. So I decided to, among other, provide different models for the Chinese devotees so they can understand how to express Vedic wisdom with Chinese characteristics. One example, it's already done. There's this, the university, Oxford University professors, together with some other devotees, put together Gita values. 6. They gave a little paragraph, and they spent half a year. Gita values. Take it out of the ivory tower of Oxford and bring it down to the people of the world. Gita values, 6. So I taught it a number of times, and I thought this would be really nice to teach in China, but I should teach it with Chinese characteristics. It was really popular. Other teachers that were teaching online shut their classes down so their students could hear it. First was an introduction. It's 5 parts. Here's what we're doing. The model is how to learn to teach, to present to Chinese people the message of Bhagavad Gita with Chinese characteristics. That's what we're doing. Part 1. And that was part 1. Part 2. A devotee in America, a female, made a little 5-7 minute PowerPoint presentation on, here's the value, say it in Chinese, the paragraph from the Oxford University folks. Here's some historical persons in China that championed this value. Here's a picture, here's their name, here's the history in Chinese culture. Number 3, Yasoda Kumar, the one that did all this research. He had 20 minutes. And he just expanded. This Gita value is in Chinese culture. That's 3 parts. 4 parts is I did my thing. It was short. Here's what the Gita value is. Here's how to understand it. And then the 5th part was questions and answers. There were like 450 people taking part in that discussion, because it was like helping them to understand Krishna consciousness or the Vedic wisdom with Chinese characteristics. It's not like they couldn't do that themselves. It's just a model to help them understand. So why am I explaining this to you? Because it has some connection with our topic. I've been preparing a presentation for their national holiday. Those of you that have Chinese co-workers in your workplace, they're workaholic people. They really work hard. You have anybody in your department? No Chinese people. They work very hard, like crazy hard. So, but for 7 days, nobody works. Their national holiday. When Mao did his thing, and they have their Independence Day. Our 4th of July, they do it for a week. It's a big deal. So that's a nice time to have a seminar. So I have a 7-day seminar coming up, October 1 through 7. And I'm preparing, following Prabhupada's footsteps, when he was, before he even lived at the Radha Damodar temple, he was at another temple, living upstairs in a little tiny room. And he wrote a 20,000 word essay on Light of the Bhagavad, because he received an invitation to go to Japan, except he didn't go because he didn't have an airfare. He didn't have the financial means. But he wrote Light of the Bhagavad for Japanese people with chapter 20 and 21 of Canto 10, which is the autumn, the rainy season and the autumn season. The rainy season comes after the summer, and then the autumn season. So it's Krishna's childhood. But it's how to understand life through nature. Prabhupada understood people of the East, they like understanding life through nature. So that was the design, and that's the presentation. And one of the verses in Light of the Bhagavad connects with something that I said earlier. All this blah, 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 it's just to make this connection. During the rainy season, there's so much rain that sometimes the paths and roadways are impassable. People can't use them. And so the grasses grow in an extreme degree, and it makes it difficult to even see the path of the road until, even when the rainy season subsides. So Prabhupada's explanation was, similarly, those who are brahmanas or those who are yogis, brahmanas that don't have proper knowledge, or yogis that are not fixed in their yoga practice, they can easily be allured by temptations from Maya and depart from their practice and become covered, like the paths during the rainy season due to neglect of, so the brahmanas or the brahmacharis or the yogis neglecting their spiritual practices. They can be subject to Maya. And so there's a whole, the Prabhupada's way of taking nature and presenting visions of what happens in nature, and helping the Chinese, or helping Oriental people, in that case it was Japan, relate to taking lessons about life from nature. You know, what one has to be able to make. Prabhupada was very expert at making Krishna consciousness relatable to all types of audiences. All types of audiences. And you listen to his recordings, depending upon where he is, there's themes that he would speak strongly about, but it was customized for the audience. It was quite flexible in approach, but very strong in principle. So how to make this Srimad Bhagavatam relatable to other than the non-resident Indians of this world? And, you know, one of the difficulties, spend some time with young people. You have children, most of you have children, and, you know, ask some teenagers what it's like being, you know, a teenager growing up in America. There are different ways of saying it, but they have to become like a chameleon, right? There's, you know, what you're like on the outside and what you're like on the inside, and how do you fit in? How do you get accepted? How do you fit in? And there's different ways, different personalities of doing that dance, but how to make Krishna consciousness relatable. Tomorrow, I'm going to Central New Jersey, and the first class is a youth class, and I'm supposed to speak about this topic. Because it's something that it's important to them. I don't know exactly what the audience is going to be. It's going to probably have to be a little bit play it by ear as we go along. But how to live a life in devotion to Krishna while being in the world as a young person. It's it's a dance. It's not. I have some idea of what I'm going to say, but it's how to make it relatable. Depends on the audience. And so I'm just going off a little bit, but the Bhagavatam doesn't change because of the audience, but it can be customized for the audience, especially if you understand what its message is. And the importance for people to be happy is to understand who they are. And a starting point is, we're not the body. And that's important and relatable for everybody, because everyone thinks they're their body, and it doesn't, like, that's a big pill. But if people want to be happy and hold on to a bodily conception, that's foolish. It's not going to happen. And then struggle and 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 struggle. And for how long are you going to struggle? Till that little light goes on, says, that's not where happiness. That's not what happiness is, and it's not going to. It's not sustainable. Even if something comes that's happiness, it's gone. And it's repeated several times through these examples of nature. Is why I brought this up. Is through the examples of nature that the seasons change, and what's this season is different than the next season. What's the next season is different. The happiness that one finds happiness, another finds misery. The agriculturists find happiness when there's a bountiful rainfall, and the business person isn't happy because he wants to see those people work in his business. But they're content because they have their necessities and you can't lure them away. Prabhupada is very explicit. And it's right in these verses, looking at what happens within the field of nature. So, Grandfather Bhishma was a great personality, superbly great personality, one of the greatest 12 Mahajans. And how is Yudhishthira feeling? He's a transcendentalist. He's a pure devotee. He's feeling grief. It's not like transcendentalists don't feel grief. But the grief is not over the body, the grief is over the soul. The body, funeral is being done for the body, and it's there's benefit that certainly that goes to the soul, but he already went back to Godhead. There's not a description of Vaikuntha Vimana descending and taking his soul to Vaikuntha. However, he was transported. He went to Vaikuntha. And he's feeling grief. Naturally so. Nonetheless, the rituals and fortunately for him, from the instructions of Grandfather Bhishma, Krishna has some service for you. The service for you is to rule the world. So that's where you go when you're feeling such feelings, or any kinds of unpleasant feelings that due to material contact. That's due to material contact. It's what happens when you have material contact, and you direct your attention to your spiritual identity as a soul meant for serving Krishna, and your service to Krishna. And that's where you learn. A transcendentalist learns to manage those emotions better by staying fixed in self-identity. Know yourself. The Bhagavatam will help carry you there, guaranteed. See if there's some discussion. It's on.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hold that a little further away and reduce the volume a little bit. Go ahead, speak.
It's about Krishna's passing away from this world, right? Like they said, like it was the curse from Brahmana, and they asked for what to do, and the Brahmana said, you can make it like a powder and you can throw it into the sea, right? I'm thinking like, how come the end could be like this?
How come the end can be like that?
Yeah.
Krishna arranged it like that. That's how. No, that's why. You have to ask Krishna, but there's some of the acharyas give the explanation that the Yadu dynasty was so powerful. The only way to remove them was for them to remove themselves. So the arrangement was made for them to remove themselves. Because after Krishna's departure, Kali Yuga begins, and the descendants of the Dwarkavasis would be very powerful, but they would become influenced by the age of Kali, and they're unstoppable people. So Krishna wanted to remove them and send them back to where they came from, so they could continue their other service besides assisting him in his pastimes. So it was them destroying themselves on a pretext of an argument that got out of hand.
Thank you, Maharaj. That helps.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. As it was written in the purport, and you also mentioned, Maharaj, that Yudhishthir Maharaj was grieving for the soul. So that was a little bit, I couldn't understand it properly because he is a pure devotee and he understands that the soul is going to go to the very good destination. And grieving is generally for the body only. When somebody knows, when someone is on a very spiritually elevated platform, my understanding was they won't ever grieve for the soul. The destination.
I sent you a document today. Did you read it? Okay. The document I sent was about the pride of the gopis. And this is a theme. One of the themes that you ask is, how can someone that's transcendental be less than transcendental? They're not less than transcendental. The gopis are not, the pride of the gopis is not the pride that we know. The grief of Yudhisthira is not the grief that we know. The grief that we know is over the body. No, there are statements about not grieving, but that's over the body. Statements in Bhagavad Gita. Why it's meant for neither the living or the dead. That's not about having to do with the body. Is there such a thing as transcendental anything? There's transcendental over the soul.
So my mind is going where Maharaj transcendental is always in relationship with Krishna.
You got it. And the range is everything. What we find here is a reflection of what's there. A distorted and perverted reflection of what's there. The range is full. Sorrow. You remember this from Ramayana. And it's described by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's ecstasy. Wait a minute. Sorrow is ecstasy. It's a transcendental emotion that it nourishes one's feelings for the Supreme. That feeling that Yudhishthira was feeling was not mundane. And he's not grieving for neither the living nor the dead. It's the soul.
Krishna is right there with them still.
That's okay. There's feelings towards jiva souls who are connected to Krishna as well.
One more question I had, Guru Maharaj. You mentioned that unpleasant feelings are due to material contact. And personally speaking for myself, like in day-to-day life, many unpleasant feelings are there. Whenever something goes against the mind, there is unpleasant feeling. So can you kindly elaborate more on this with some example if possible?
Well, the principle first, attachment to the temporary has its features of duality, sometimes and sometimes. The sun is setting, and soon it'll be night. It's just part of the duality. There's day and night. It's the summer season. Wait a while. We're from Chicago, we know. It's going to change. So, contact with material means duality. So there's going to be the happy and the unhappy. And most people are worldly people, they only know the mind and the happiness and distress of the mind. and the senses, not of the soul, although the inclination is there, especially for spiritualists, but even the others. The inclination is of the soul. So, those how for you and me and the rest of us, how to process those unpleasant feelings with detachment, starting with jnana vairagya. It's not me. I'm the observer, and over there's the mind, and then there's some feelings in the mind. I'm not the mind, and I'm not the feelings in the mind. I'm the observer. That's starters. It's 101. It's what people who do counseling. It's one of the techniques, even for non-spiritual counselors. It's just it's a principle of counseling. That feeling is not you. You're the observer. It's Sankhya. And then with that little knowledge and detachment, then the window or the window or the door are open for bhakti thoughts to restore in your relationship with Krishna, and that you can get on with where you're going with your life, knowing that the other is not who I am. And as long as I maintain attachment to that which I'm not, the recipe is very clear. I'm going to get burned again and again and again. So it's not that you have to stop your activities or stop interacting with people, or become a hermit or something, go in a cave and something, shut the world out. But you process things in it with transcendental consciousness. You learn, and in devotion to Krishna, to do like that. It takes some time. It takes some purity. It takes some spiritual strength. But that's where the bhakti train takes you. Get on board.
It's a little follow-up I have.
Okay.
So can we understand from this that everything is basically good or transcendental, but it's just our mind which makes it seem like
Well, it's not exactly. It's neither good nor bad.
transcendent.
No, materially speaking, there's good and bad. There's right and wrong. There's light and dark. There's pleasure, pain. There's happy, sad. The material plane duality is not false, but it's not that everything is good. What Vladimir Putin is doing is not good. Not good. There's everything good. Paint a smile on your face. It's not. But and how to process it, that which is not good. Transcendentalists learn how to deal with the temporary, at the same time, mama nusmara yudhyacha. Perform your prescribed duty and always think of Krishna. That's yoga. That's bhakti yoga.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Anything over here? No? Looks like you're going to let me off light tonight.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. This is, I guess, the question I have, a little curious question to know the comparison between the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna told Arjuna when they were having the war versus the Uddhav Gita after the war, Krishna told to Uddhava. So the teaching behind, Bhagavad Gita is very famous for,
Yes.
daily, applications. But Uddhav Gita is not that famous. So how, can you glorify Uddhav Gita more, and what is the teaching?
Yes, it's like it's graduate school. Undergraduate school is much more common than graduate school. and people who finish their undergraduate study and want to go on to graduate school, it's yummy. It's not that that the teachings in Uddhava Gita are different teachings. It's just very elaborate. Here's one example. There's a section where Krishna is explaining, in terms of the analytical Sankhya, the analytical study of matter and spirit, there are different philosophers. And some say there's 8, some say there's 24, some say 7, some say 9, some say 13. And they're all right. Depends, it's just a different perspective on the same topic. Now, in Bhagavad Gita, there's 2 of those. In 7th chapter, there's 8. 13th chapter, there's 24. Elements, material elements. It's just another different way of looking at it. So Krishna lays it all out for Uddhava because his acumen is greater even than Arjuna.
Both talk about Bhakti Yoga, but Guru Maharaj.
Both the topics are quite similar. Bhakti is, it's just expanded and unpacked and say more, and then he packs it back up again.
Again, with reference to Arjuna, when Krishna was literally walking him through the whole scenario that Arjuna was facing, the lamentation and everything.
Yes.
Uddhava was a pure devotee.
But so is Arjuna.
So was Arjuna. Just, I guess the situation was different.
Yes, it was
something
different.
that we take in Kali Yuga, because Uddhav Gita is very close to, again, if you see chronologically, Uddhav Gita is more closer to Kali Yuga versus Bhagavad Gita. Is it something
That's not
we are-
so much, that's not the major point. It's not chronologically which was closer to Kali Yuga beginning. The relationship between Uddhava and Krishna and the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna are different. The circumstance of standing on a battlefield is different than Krishna sitting in Dwarka and Uddhava knowing he's going to depart and wanting, sustenance so he can carry on after Krishna departs. If you won't take me with you, give me that which can help sustain my existence, so if I can always remember you. I mean, Arjuna asked that question, and we get the Vibhuti Yoga chapter. So it's graduate level. It's not as famous because people can't understand the undergraduate, what to speak of the graduate. You've got a question for your dad, or just for the rest of us? All of us? No. Okay. Okay. I'm fine. We'll close up. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.